Hi, my name is Lee Hickey, and this is my presentation, Tender Places, for the International Community Psychology Conference. I want to start by acknowledging the ancestors, peoples, and lands of the Aranda Nation, where I live and where I'm recording this from today. I'd like to acknowledge all First Nations people watching this, and all people, lands, and their ancestors who struggle against colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, and extraction. I also want to pay respects to and honour my own ancestors, from whom I'm indebted to for being here, and as a fifth generation settler, to whom I'm indebted by to do this work. Today, I'm going to talk about my creative research project, Tender Places, which I undertake as a PhD candidate at Victoria University. This work has multiple elements, creative and pedagogical. And today I'm going to share a little of the walking with theory practice developed through this project and some of the creative products arising from this practice. I'm now just going to switch to sharing screens and I'll tell you a bit more about the work. Tender Places investigates the moral responsibilities of settler people in the time of climate change through participatory, place-based, creative and pedagogical practice. My approach to learning has been experiential and theoretical. Such is the entanglement of colonialism and extraction that in order to engage with issues of place and climate change, I first had to make visible and disrupt the settler colonialism and white supremacy in my own life as a settler person. During the first year of my PhD, I became increasingly involved in the anti-fracking movement and the ongoing struggle to protect the Beetaloo Basin, which is ongoing and escalating as this is being recorded. The work of scholars such as Deborah Bird-Rose, Eve Tuck and Wayne Yang, and Claire Land pushed me to understand my complicit role in the extraction of wealth from Aboriginal lands and the reproduction of colonialism in my own life as a fifth generation settler of mixed European descent. Rob Nixon's theory of slow violence contextualised the way that the settler state colludes with corporations to invisibilise and disperse responsibility for the impacts of extraction on Aboriginal lands, bodies and futures, and the role of artists in exposing affected communities' hidden narratives of survival and resistance. The intersection of my theoretical reading and personal experience helped me to understand how internalised white supremacy undermined my capacity to meaningfully contribute to the campaign led by traditional owners and affected community members. Looking back, I understand the process of engaging with and making sense of these ideas and experiences as the messy and intellectual labour as the messy, emotional and intellectual labour of transformative praxis that has shaped my research process. I began to walk as a way of reflecting on and making sense of what I was learning through my activism and desktop research. I became interested in pedagogical and creative practices that could expose and disrupt the settler gaze and the potential new ways of seeing and being that might emerge from this disruption. Influenced by Truman and Springay's provocations for walking research, I began to engage with literature as an agent of defamiliarisation. I selected the Opapa clay pans, pictured here, which are a series of 12 ephemeral clay pans, as the site for a series of walking experiments, which positioned my body at the intersection of ideas, experience, and land. I chose this site for sentimental reasons. I often frequented this popular dog walking spot some 12 kilometres south of the township of Alice Springs and was distressed by its increasing deterioration through invasive weeds, dumping and four-wheel drive driving. Each experiment began with a reading of a short excerpt from a text foundational to my writing practice. These were selected based on the intertextual relationality and or personal resonance of what I was walking with that day. As I walked, I placed my body in a discursive relationship with text and place, paying acute attention to my physical, emotional, and intellectual experiences and reactions throughout the walk, Walking repeatedly in place through a series of returns across seasons, I attuned my body to place, capturing what I found in fragments of text, image, and sound. Sometimes technology was able to enhance a certain sense, such as when I walked with microphones, extending my range of listening through headphones. The documentation of these experiences intersected with the ideas I was walking with, enabling a meaning making at this intersection of place, bodies, and the ideas and words of others. I documented the findings of these walking investigations through photos, text, and voice recordings on my phone, noting the impact of the theory on my view of place and vice versa. As the experiment continued, I began to collect detritus on my walk, bits of abandoned car parts, plastic, and other pieces of rubbish, which I would later incorporate into my practice through cyanotypes. Margaret Somerville's emergent art-based methodologies and elements of place pedagogy provided a framework through which to understand and locate these walking experiments and creative translations. Writing on the epistemic relationship between maker and medium, Somerville locates each creative rendering at the intersection of medium, body, and place. Individual renderings are iterative and located within a multiplicity of renderings and reflections, which can be arranged and rearranged to create an assemblage of place, layered with relational meaning making. This model of emergence arts-based methodologies informs my practice of translating individual walks into artifacts, including postcards, poetry, and cyanotypes. The works I'll present next, postcards from the clay pans, shadow work, and testing ground, demonstrate a progression of iterative engagements with this site via Papa clay pans through different materials, methods, and audiences engaged in each process. So the postcards from the clay pans were formed in the early stages of my walking experiments, when I was involved in a mail art project created by artists with whom I'd shared an international residency in the previous year. I began to send postcards of this practice as my contribution to this project. These postcards documented and translated the walking practice. They traversed the greylands of public and private correspondence in the lineage of other postcard projects, such as Frank Warren's Postcard Post Secret and Paul Nelson's Postcard Poetry Fest. The epistemic and ontological reflections on this medium are summarised here. The postcard is presented as a queering medium, an appropriated artefact of outsider privilege, a public-private artwork for an audience of one, a material that crosses political and geographical borders to link places and people through space and time. I'd like to show you some of these individual postcards, which have been further translated to 3-line poetic summaries that capture the essence of the personal correspondence, and they're presented alongside the original postcard image, which was sourced from fieldwork photos. Postcard 1. Drifting there, I found only despair. Stuck in patterns of grief, I externalized blame and internalized shame. Drifting there, I found only despair. Stuck in patterns of grief, I externalized blame and internalized shame. 2. Hope is an action of making space and trusting what is in the ground. Hope is an action of making space and trusting what is in the ground. 3. Surrendering self as protagonist, releasing the colonial need to do, be, know, and have everything. Surrendering self as protagonist, releasing the colonial need to do, be, know, and have everything. Shadow work. Throughout January 2020, a month of extreme heat, I engaged in a further iteration of practice that translated the digital notes and found objects into a material work pictured here. I chose to work with cyanotypes. The medium's capture of object shadows and historical context of blueprinting in engineering alluded to the collective shadows of colonial materialisms that the work explored. Objects collected during my writing practice were arranged to create cyanotypes that gestured towards the settler impacts on place that I had documented in the field notes of my walking practice. 12 of these cyanotypes were chosen, one for each of the clay pans, to create an autoethnographic map examining the impact of settler culture on the Opapa clay pans. Excerpts from the corresponding field notes were used to create a found poem that acted as the map's key and formed part of the artist's statement accompanying the work. Shadow work is exhibited as part of Groundswell, Recent Movements in Art and Territory, which is a touring exhibition through the Northern Territory this year and next. In contrast to the dialogical intimacy of a postcard sent to peers, the work's presentation within this public and curated exhibition locates this iteration of practice in relationship with other artists engaged in a struggle for water rights in the Northern Territory. And I'll read the autoethnographic found poem that accompanies this work. The first thing you see are the tyre ruts, the trench cut into the clay pans by four-wheel drives, manifesting in the landscape as wholeness hunger. Where once was clay, there is now only stones, dog prints marked into the mud, a rusted can blending into the dirt, a whole car burned to the ground. What stories do our remains tell? Landcare, with their buffle busting, brings me hope in this place. The mud, the emu, the glasses keep on doing the business of life. Beneath the moon, letting go of a friend, we grieve, the shield shrimps and I. And this is a detail of the trench cut into the clay pans by four-wheel drives, which was created through a bit of a broken, rusted muffler that I found while I was walking. Embodied translations and testing ground. So I'm about to embark on a third iteration of this practice. Reflecting on Rose's writing on care and Dougal Hines' writing on art as service and ritual, I'll be presenting a durational performance installation at our local artist run initiative, Watch This Space, in Mbantua, Alice Springs, from the 11th to the 28th of November 2020. During the 17 days of the exhibition, I will walk at the clay pans, collecting dumped refuse and invasive buffalo grass, which will be used to form a mandala, something that I am both reclaiming and returning in a reflection of my walking and thinking in service of place. Continuing my use of text in the works, an excerpt from field notes from each day's walking and collecting will be written on the ground throughout the exhibition. Reflecting the relationality of previous engagements and building on this, I'll be inviting people to participate in this daily ritual of walking and collecting with me. This work is part of a collective installation, Embodied Translations, which is a conversation between my work, Testing Ground, and Grounding Sound, another collaborative artwork responding to place, whose creation is being led by artist and designer Elliot Rich in collaboration with 4 other women. So the Tender Places research project, as I have discussed, investigates the moral responsibilities of settler people in the time of climate change through creative and participatory place-based pedagogical practice. This presentation has outlined the development of the Walking with Theory practice and subsequent creative translations. These practices are contextualised within my own experience as a settler artist, activist and research, and located within lineages of feminist, anti-colonial and place-based research. The works I've shared today are examples of research in progress, part of an iterative process of meaning making. These works, along with other iterations and translations, form an assemblage of creative practice, which will be resolved in the creative artistic work and exegesis in 2022. You can find out more about this work on the project website and Instagram, and I welcome your thoughts through feedback, questions, via email, which you can find on the website. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful day.